Hello, hello, everyone. It's time again for my daily COVID-19 call. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook College, School of Journalism at Stony Brook University. I am delighted to have this opportunity to connect with the world when we are supposed to be physically distant. We're using technology to be socially close. And this particular tool that I'm using called StreamYard allows me to be live on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And you can find the archives on any of those platforms, but most easily probably on YouTube. We do this every single day as the crisis continues. And the time varies depending on what else I have going on. But my next show is going to be on Monday. That'll be show number 11 about economic hardship and how we deal with inequality, poverty, labor issues in the middle of this crisis. And that's at noon Eastern on Monday. Today is Sunday night, and this is the second Sunday night show that I have done since the crisis has started. So that tells you I've been doing this for 10 straight days. While I say that we're on lockdown in New York for 10 days, of course, the crisis has gone on for much longer in other places. And so when we have these global conversations, it's important to note that what feels like a limited time in New York and in the US has been going on for much longer in other countries. And I want to thank everyone who has been watching, and thank you for your questions, your comments. Please hit share right now if you're on Facebook, Twitter, or on LinkedIn, and share this with your friends and let them come in and join us and ask questions. And you're all welcome to ask questions. And also tell us where you're watching from. Steve Taylor is watching from Philly. He's at Steve DeReeve. Do follow him. Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. It's been a weekend with Sree. He's saying that because of Social Media Weekend, which we just finished yesterday. And it's always fun to hang out with Jonathan, but I have to do it online. And Alicia Marie is watching from Michigan. Please tag your friends, anybody who would benefit from a moment of positivity, because for the next hour, we're going to be talking with a positive psychologist. And I had not even heard that term, but we're going to hear all about it from our next speaker. So I'm going to give you a moment to just tag your friends, invite your friends, and just tell them to come in, and also ask anything you'd like. Not always that you get to talk to a psychologist and not have to pay for it, and we're going to do that. So consider this kind of positive therapy that we're doing. And in previous sessions, we have interviewed folks from all over the world. We did a Living in Europe edition with someone who was watching from was speaking to us from Italy, someone from the Czech Republic. We've also done multiple sessions with physicians to talk about what's happening in the world and how to handle all the various issues. We did one on being helpful. We did one on technology. So you can find all the archives at Sreenet, Sreenet. Please do check that out on YouTube. If you're not a subscriber, it's kind of new to a new platform for me. So would love to see all of you go in there and join me there. You'll get an alert every time I'm live, and you can also see the archives. It's also where we post our New York Times read-alongs. Every Sunday we read the print edition of the New York Times, and it's an amazing gathering around the world. Thousands of people watch that, and you can see the archives of that. And today we had the great Stephen Greenhouse, who many of you know, labor reporter at the New York Times for 30 years, and he shared some positive and some very negative thoughts about how everything is being handled right now. So thank you for tagging your friends. Let's see who's here. Staying positive in Georgia. Deborah says hello. Geeta says 7-year-old city baby and mama city girl need uplifting energy. Tuning in. Yay. Thank you for being here. Arlene says she's staying positive uptown. So let's go and get our guest and bring him in here and hear all his thoughts as well. Sudha Parekh is watching from Hastings on Hudson. So here we go. I think we're ready for our wonderful guest. And he is. Hello, sir.
Hi, Sree. How are you?
So nice to have you with us. Let me introduce you all to Dr. Oren Davis, who has joined us. not very far from where we are. I am hunkered down on 96th Street on the Upper West Side. And where are you, sir?
Just a few blocks away.
Yeah, just a few blocks away. And tell me right now, what's happening? Where are you? How are you feeling? What's your mood? What's going on?
I think it's a stressful time for everybody. So I would say that I'm stressed. I would say that, everybody around me is stressed. But a lot of us are really pushing hard to stay positive and to keep things going, to have as good of a time as we can, and to really make the most of whatever opportunities are being offered by being hunkered down in quarantine.
So let me tell folks a little bit about you, and then you add to our knowledge. Oren Davis is a positive psychologist, a term I'd not heard before, and Dr. Davis is the founder of the Quality of Life Laboratory and can get us ready for new ways we work in this particular crisis. He earned the first ever doctorate in positive psychology at Claremont Graduate University, and he did a wonderful TEDx talk for University of Maryland that we've posted on our site. In the description and Facebook and other places that you can find. Those if you just Google Dr. Oren Davis, but you don't need to watch that because you're going to hear him right now. So let's start with the obvious question: what is a positive psychologist?
So a lot of what positive psychology looks at is basically, I like to call it the psychology of what does work and what works well. Probably the more formal concept of it is the science of human flourishing, just how things can go well for people, how people can have more positive experiences in life, how people can live a fulfilling life, a meaningful life, looking a little bit more towards self-actualization. And that's a lot of the work that I do is relating to self-actualization, do and be their best. It relates to people's best experiences, people's best selves, the states in which our best is most accessible, and how we develop into our best selves.
And is this something that's growing? So you were the first to get a degree in positive psychology at Claremont. How many other people are there? How many people were there before you in other universities? And how did you decide that this is what you want to do?
So I was the first to earn a doctorate in positive psychology.
Yeah.
There's been there have been multiple master's programs prior to that. And the first of the doctorate program, Yojin Rowe, she graduated after I did, however. And then now the Claremont program has expanded significantly. There are master's programs all over the world. You can get them in lots of places. I think Claremont remains the only university that is offering a doctorate in positive psychology, but there are a great many people that are earning doctorates in psychology with a focus on positive psychology at universities all over the world. There are positive psychology centers all over the world, and people developing this on every continent and in many different countries.
So if you call it positive psychology, then what is regular psychology? Does that mean that that's more negative, or how do you differentiate that?
A lot of what we see in the regular psychology is we're looking at how to fix problems, how to make things not work so badly. And a lot of times when we talk about going to a psychologist or seeing a psychologist, we're usually thinking of this as there's something wrong with us that we want to fix. Now, I would agree with many psychologists saying, no, it's way more than that. It should be more than that. And indeed it is. But positive psychology is specifically focused on thriving, flourishing, not really necessarily focused on fixing problems, but really just taking people beyond neutral, taking people into taking people into functioning well, living well, and having a great life.
And when people have to decide where to go to, when they want to see a psychologist, how do they decide of those two approaches, and how is that most easily explainable?
I think finding a psychologist is a very personal experience, and that's something that people need to do carefully. So it's not necessarily just what the bent is so much as what else you need to think about, how well you're going to get along with a psychologist. There are many, many different approaches to psychology, and all of them do want to bring you to human flourishing. Like, all of them want to bring you to the best life that you can get. It's just that different approaches work better for different people. Some people prefer a Freudian psychotherapeutic approach. Some people prefer a more Rogerian humanistic approach, which is basically positive psychology anyway. Positive psych came from humanistic psych. So you have those all together. But and other people would prefer something more like cognitive behavioral therapy. There are many different ways, techniques. It's a lot of it has to be personalized and tweaked. And so, the idea is that you talk with a bunch of different people that might be able to help you and find the one that matches your style.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of the comments. As I said, Arlene says she's staying positive uptown, and Tim Sohn has just joined us from Pennsylvania. He was playing a game of life over Zoom with friends. Bimal is joining us from Massachusetts in Boston, and Geeta has just tagged a friend of hers. Everyone, just tag a friend who could benefit from some positivity at this moment or in a recording later. So just tag them or hit share on whatever platform you're on. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please do that. And Anand says he and I should do one together. That'd be great. We have a viewer from San Jose. Alicia Marie says this is a lot of what my work as a coach is based on. So that's great to hear that. Arlene has a very specific question. What is self-actualization? Because that's a phrase we've heard.
So there are a lot of different definitions. I like to go with Maslow's, just going with the idea of fulfilling your potential. It raises all sorts of secondary questions of what is your potential? How do you fulfill it? What does it mean to actually become the most that you're capable of becoming? And Maslow pointed out that really to go beyond self-actualization, to transcend, to self-transcend, to create something for the future. This is a great moment to put a shout out to Scott Barry Kaufman, whose upcoming book Transcend is going to be looking at a later, like a more updated version of what self-actualization is and what it's about. Haven't gotten to read it yet, but I'm very excited.
All right, let's see who else is here. Ami says, this is great. I'm curious what software we're using to simulcast like this. Thank you. Great question. We're live on all these platforms. We're using this software called StreamYard. It requires no downloading on the part of anyone participating. And once you join, you can go to 2, 3, or 5 different channels. And so I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, my main personal Facebook, and my Sree's advanced Facebook group, which is got 9,000 people on that. And then I'm also live on LinkedIn. You need to be invited into that LinkedIn program to have LinkedIn Live, but that's what I'm using, StreamYard. It's very reasonable. I did our entire conference yesterday, Social Media Weekend. We had 200 people watching for about 10 hours yesterday, and all of that was done using StreamYard. And what it allows us to do is bring in these comments from other places, ask a question. All of that you can do very easily on this. And you can see right now that someone's invited all their friends, and that's so useful. Alicia Marie says, I like that terminology of human flourishing and fulfilling your potential and living your best life. Thanks for sharing. So you've already taught us something, Oren. Thank you very much. For those of you who are joining in from a Facebook group, there is one thing you have to do so that we can read your name here. So I'll just put up a banner that explains it. If you're watching in a Facebook group, you have to go to streamyard.com/Facebook once to give permission in order to see this. So let me just show this to you again. You can read this. So this is only if you're watching inside a group. If you just go onto my Facebook and you post inside Facebook, we'll see the picture and comments. So it's always nice to do that. They don't take any other information from you, just so you can see it. So here's an example. Kalpana is watching directly in my main Facebook feed. So when she makes a comment, I can pull it up here. This person is watching in my advanced Facebook group. So I can't see this unless she makes that connection between StreamYard and Facebook. You just need to go to that page once. And once you do that, you will easily be able to have your picture shown when you make a comment. So that's a nice thing. So this is an example of that. So you go to streamyard.com/Facebook and you can give that permission. So here is, let's get right to it because we've got so many questions coming in. And Arlene says, what can people do to remain positive when the news in New York City is so bleak? And normally I ask for tight answers, but I'm going to ask you, Oren, for a slightly longer answer so that I can go get some water. I forgot to get water before I sat down. These are troubles that regular television doesn't have. This is home-produced television, so thank you very much. And we're going to hand this over to you. You're driving now, okay? Thanks.
No problem. So the first thing is, it's worth taking a minute to acknowledge that the news is bleak. A lot of this is where, it doesn't serve anybody to bury their heads in the sand, to think about, oh, things are going to be great. The news is bleak. Yeah, don't worry about that. No, we can worry about that. That's okay. And I think one of the first things is just to give ourselves a moment to acknowledge that the news is bleak. The news is somewhat scary. There's a lot of unknown, and that's okay. And it's okay for us to be concerned and to have those moments. And then the rest of what we do is we have a little bit of self-compassion for ourselves, for our concerns, and not to worry about the fact that we are concerned. But from there, we also have to move on to what are the opportunities for us. We know what we can't do, which is go out or do a lot of other things. But there are a lot of things that we can do. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a very long to-do list of things always wanted to do. These include things like baking. I haven't done very much of it. Looking forward to doing more. I've got a long movie list. I've got a long reading list. And these are things that I've been wanting to get off my checklist for so long. And these are many different types of fun. One of the other things that's also really important to do is move around. And one of the things that I've done, this may sound really weird, but I actually like doing walking meetings. And since I can't exactly leave my apartment or go out very much, what I can do still is walk around the apartment when I'm on the phone or when I'm FaceTiming with people. So we're actually taking a walk together. I've had friends who have been getting together and having lunch together or watching movies together, making sure that they have social time with one another. And also just sharing the good and the funny things that happen. I'm very fortunate that I have friends with really adorable kids. And lots of them have been posting pictures, videos of the kids. Other friends of mine have pets, and they are posting pictures of their pets. The pets are really cute. My friends hanging out with their pets is really cute. And definitely some quick live videos of that. Other people are just sharing projects that they made. So different forms of arts, crafts, any number of things like this. Now, I've seen some questions about people looking about the internal work, just managing our own emotional states. And here again, self-compassion is one of the most important things that we need to think about. Kristen Neff did some great TED Talks on that. I highly advise that people look at that. I've seen some questions about people managing anxiety or other negative emotions. Here I'm going to cite Todd Kashdan, also gave a great TED Talk about that. But one of the things is, first of all, just to accept what we're feeling, but then to be able to step back and notice what we're feeling, why we're feeling it. That also helps us to get out of any traps that we're afraid of falling into. So we can accept what we're thinking, we can accept what we're feeling, and first to recognize that that's okay. And once we validate our feelings, our emotions, we can start to move beyond them. But one of the things that I'm seeing is that people are getting a bit upset at themselves for getting stressed or any number of other things. And they're saying, well, I shouldn't be stressed. I shouldn't be upset. That doesn't help you as much. Rather, accept your stress, accept your upset. But from there, realize that you can find ways to have fun and to have a good time. And that the more sunshine you create, the more sunshine you can share. And just knowing that you can spread that positivity, that you can spread that sunshine is quite an incredible thing. I've been watching a number of artist friends of mine doing daily projects, spreading the sunshine. Shout out to my friend Sherry Pear for doing that. She's been doing great stuff with 15-minute musings, giving us inspirational graphics and drawings and cartoons. So we all have the ability to share that. And what's funny is this is one of the best things that we can do for other people is create sunshine in our own homes and then share it outside so that when we need some, we could draw some in. And we all definitely are going to have moments where we need some. So go look for where other people have put it out.
I love that idea. And Sarush says, such a useful, timely conversation. Thank you so much for watching, everybody around the world. Tell us where you're watching from. Tag your friends. Anyone who could use an uplifting hour of conversation will be live till 10 o'clock Eastern. That's another 40 minutes. And then it'll all be archived. So you can watch. And we're on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and LinkedIn. So on any of those platforms, if you have a friend, just text them and say, find me, and I'm live right now, and I'll also be archived. And if you're not subscribed to me yet on any of those channels or on YouTube especially, because I'm new there, please do follow. I'm up to only about 500 followers there, but I know it's going to be more important to have that kind of archive there. So please do check it out. And I got to say, Oren, this is basically what I'm trying to do, right? In terms of trying to be positive and do something useful with my time every day, doing 1 hour, bringing people around the world together. And people say, it's so nice of you to do this for other people. Actually, I'm doing it as much for myself as I am for anyone else. Alicia Marie says, yes, acknowledge and accept. We can't do a spiritual bypass around the facts of the situation. We can control our response and what we do with the situation. It can grow us if we let it. So let's talk a little bit also about your being a psychologist. You don't have traditional patients, right? You focused on HR and the way we work. So let's talk a little bit about your quality of life lab that you run.
Sure. So it's got a couple different arms. One of them is the consulting arm where I'm doing HR consulting. And a lot of what I do is I help companies hire better. I help them think about the talent differently, the connection and the fit between the person and the job. And this has implications for things like hiring strategy, diversity and inclusion, equity, employee engagement, things along those lines. So I'm really called in to help with those things, sometimes employee relations. And I'm helping basically to help ensure that people are doing the right job and they're doing the job that they can make the most of, where they can really apply their talents to the job and make a good fit so that they feel like they're really doing something that is important and meaningful to them. And they're actually using their unique strengths and talents to create something of value and really move toward executing on the company's value proposition, really to create value for the world through their work. And because my interest is self-actualization, we find that a lot of people actually self-actualize through their work. They're creative through their work. They experience flow through their work. So I want to make sure, and I and they and everybody wants to make sure that the job and the person have made the right fit. And that means sometimes tweaking the hiring strategy so you find the right person, tweaking the management systems, tweaking the culture, and in other cases, looking at diversity and inclusion, things along those lines. On the research side, I do work on mentoring, I do work on flow, creativity, and basically looking at all the ways in which we actually produce our best work, the advice that we get, the advising we get, those advising relationships. Also looking at creative performance, creative ideation, and also just experiencing flow, mostly on a daily basis. And I did my doctorate with Csikszentmihalyi working on flow and microflow. So it's been very exciting research. And I also have the joy of working with Dr. Jeff Vandenhout off in the Netherlands, and we work on flow and teams together. So some fun collaborations as well.
So we have a question from Patrick over on LinkedIn. You know, it's a little hard. I'm producing this by myself. Those of you who've seen me do the New York Times read along every Sunday morning, we have a crew of 4 people manning all the platforms and doing such a great professional job that we now we have sponsors. And that happened this morning for the first time, and it was fantastic. We talked to Stephen Greenhouse from the New York Times. He was a labor reporter there for a long time, and he talked about all the issues that workers are having in this crisis. So please go back and find it on my Facebook, on my Twitter, etc. But this time I'm kind of flying by myself here. And so as I'm doing that, I just looked at my LinkedIn, and we have about another 25, 30 comments there. And Patrick asks, who would not be a good candidate for positive psychology? You know, we were asking like who should be selecting, but are there people who just it doesn't work for some reason?
I don't think it's a matter of whether it works or it doesn't work. I think that people are more or less in a position to take advantage of positive psychology. So some people are in very difficult situations and they need to, in some cases, work beyond it and actually get some assistance to bring them up to zero and to move towards human flourishing. But that doesn't mean that there aren't positive psychology interventions that can be adjunctive or that can help, because what positive psychology looks at, these are things like gratitude, savoring, mindfulness, flow, creativity. I think no matter what situation people are in, there are opportunities to have these experiences, and they can always be beneficial. Whether you want a therapist who is a positive psychologist, that's one of those, there's no one size fits all. And there's, this is, as mentioned before, a very unique experience and something that people should select carefully.
Thank you. Alicia Marie says, so cool. Would love to see your research on flow. It's such a great topic. I experience flow easily, but accessing it is a skill that can be learned. And let's do flow one more time so people who are joining, because right now people are coming in from all over. And I also wanted to make sure that Oren himself has shared this with his network on Facebook and the other platforms. And all of you are watching right now, just hit share or retweet or repost so that your friends can join, or you can tag specific friends somewhere who would benefit from this, or post it into a group you like so that people can join us and participate. Go ahead, Oren.
So a lot of the work on flow. Flow is considered one of the most positive experiences that we can have. It's got a lot of features to it, and one of them is that we're generally in pursuit of a clear goal in which we know that we're getting feedback. We're getting clear feedback that helps us to know whether we're pursuing that goal in an effective way. We usually get into a very, very focused experience. So time seems to either move in a weird way, dilates, contracts. Time doesn't seem to run the way it usually does. Usually this is going to happen because we pick something that is challenging for us, where we've really got to bring our A game. Typically, this is something that we find intrinsically motivating, something that we love to do just for its own sake. I can tell you, for example, many people with their hobbies or with their chosen careers, that they are often doing things that they're intrinsically motivated to do. They find challenges within that. They get lost in those challenges, but they feel like they're in control of the situation. They know what they've got to do. They know what the goal is. They know how to figure out whether they're getting the right way, and they can really push on it and pursue it very well, very effectively. And that is the experience of flow.
Got it. I should tell you that I'm hunkered down in my son's bedroom. You can see his basketball hoop up, mini basketball hoop up there. And by the way, one of my mom's favorite paintings that she's ever done. She's an oil painter. She lives in India, and she made that of Dal Lake in Kashmir in India. And one of the things that I want to ask you is about the sandwich that I'm in here. You know, I have my teenage children, my mother. I'm with my teenage children all day, every day, and my wife. We always wanted more time together. Well, here we have it. And I want to see my mother and my father, but they're all the way in India. How are people handling this? And what are your tips on dealing with kids who you may be seeing too much, and maybe some relatives you're not seeing enough?
So I think one of those things is that it's difficult. So thing one is acknowledge that it's difficult. That's okay. And also here are situations where we just can't do the things that we want to do, and we have to forgive ourselves for that. We're going to put in our best efforts, but many of us are being pulled in a lot of different directions, sometimes 2, 3, 4 completely different roles that we're all expected to fulfill simultaneously, and we just can't. And I think the first thing is just forgive ourselves for the fact that we just can't. The second thing is we really need to have that compassion for one another as well, just to recognize that most of us are now in all of these competing role situations. And so while they may have been able to be responsive or helpful or to give us things, their time, their attention in ways that were, at specific times or in volumes that we're used to, this is all going to change, and people just can't do it all. So we need to have compassion for other people. We need to have forgiveness for ourselves. But then the next thing is, this is a great opportunity to try and reach out. For those of us who have the time, some of us, it's the funniest thing, but some of us are completely swamped because now we've got to be 4 people at once. And some of us have gotten some relief because we're now all just working from home. And so we might be in a little bit more of a solitary position. So one of the things that we might need to be able to do is divide a little bit better. And one of the things that I've seen, for example, which is incredible to me, is that some folks who have a little bit more time are now tutoring or entertaining their friends' kids, and are spending time with the kids, playing games with the kids, teaching the kids things, helping out in those ways because they've now got the time. And that actually gives their friends a break to just, either be with their spouses or spend more time on their jobs or do the things that they need to do. It takes a village, and now we're all grateful for the fact that we've got all this technology to make a virtual village. So this is something that we can do to help. And one of the things that we're all going to have to do, and I know this is hard. I mean, it's very hard for me. It's hard for everybody. For most of the people I know, we're going to have to ask for help. And many of us are afraid to. Many of us are afraid of asking for help and being turned down. But what's funny is there's so many people who want to help but don't know how and just need an ask. So if we can, make a specific ask out there, we might be surprised to discover just how much is out there. And some of my friends and some people that I know, they have made specific requests for help on the internet, either in social media or in other places. And the responses they've got back, they've been practically turning away help. So we're all pitching in, and that's great news.
Yeah, that's great. We have about 30 minutes left, folks. You're watching a conversation with Oren Davis, Ph.D. He is one of the first people to get a doctorate in positive psychology. He was, in fact, the very first person at his school at Claremont Graduate University. And he was telling us how now this is taught and understood on all the continents, and he's been sharing some ideas. And so we want to talk specifically about work, and we have lots of questions coming in. I just wanted to read some of the comments over on LinkedIn. Who's watching? Arshia is watching from Hoboken. Jinja is watching from Snowfield, Chicago. Annie from Baltimore. Henry from the Upper West Side. Krishna says, thank you for your timely updates. Not my son, Krishna, another Krishna. E.B. Moss says, hi from the Upper West Side. And they're all asking about how we're all talking here and sharing our ideas, and we're getting multiple thumbs up. So I just want you to know that people are connecting with you there. Let's remind people how they can find you. They can find you on Twitter at Dr. Oren Davis. What are the other platforms you're on, websites, etc.? Let's tell them that.
So I'm also on Medium at Dr. Oren Davis, and I'm on LinkedIn, of course. I am less on Facebook, but my website is www.qllab.org, Quality of Life Lab, qllab.org. And most of what I'm doing, I just keep it to Twitter, Medium, and my website.
All right, great. And I know you've shared this already on those platforms, and so people, your own networks can join you. And that's one of my tips for anyone who does these things. Make sure your guests are also sharing with their audience, because it's that combination of networks that makes this also interesting. Therese, who's a dear friend, asks, what should individuals do to access their creativity while sheltering in place? And I have some thoughts, but this is for you.
Sure. So one of the things about creativity is first to recognize that you've got lots of potential to do it. People often try and bend over backwards to do this, but the reality is we do it all the time. We are creative in so many different situations in so many different ways. So, I mean, I hate to be somewhat pedantic, but like one of the questions would be exactly what level or what type of creativity do you mean? Some people are jury rigging their lives in all sorts of ways, and that's extremely creative. The ways that I'm watching, for example, parents balancing all these roles. They've got to work. They've now got to take care of their kids, all day, every day. And they're coming up with incredibly creative ways to do that. The ways in which we jury rig stuff to just make it work. If an appliance breaks, we jury rig that. We come up with some kind of solution. So there's that also. For many of us, we want to access the artistic side of our creativity. And that's often, I find that when people are asking me about creativity, it's that they want to bring out the creative juices. And a lot of that is, so there are many, many different techniques for this. Some of them are about creative problem solving. So one of my favorites there are a couple of those, but one of them is just imagining the cute little ideal world that doesn't exist. But don't worry about that. Just imagine the cute little ideal world. Paint yourself that picture. See how things could be. Another one of those is trying to figure out, one of my favorites is the 5 whys. And if you've ever had to talk with a really young kid, and you say something and then they go, why? And then you say something else and they go, why? And they just don't seem to stop asking why. And go to five levels of those whys, just 5, and you'll start to really find yourself inventing some things. Another one of my favorites, which I've encountered in a lot of places, but I've had the pleasure of dealing with some of the tools for this, especially working with Greg Fraley, Kate Hammer, and their team, looking at something called forced mashups. So how is something like something else? I'll give you a story from one of my creativity courses. I had a student struggling with a theory, trying to come up with an explanation for something. And I just stopped her and I said, okay, how is your theory like a banana? And just asking her to connect this to some random household object and making these kinds of forced analogies, it really is an incredibly cool creativity technique. And one of the things that I learned from working with that team, third of which is Indonesia. So looking at the cultural trends that are out there, and it's sort of like we can take something that we're looking at and say, how can we look at how can we connect this item to a cultural trend? And like what's going on right now. So, in a certain sense, it's like what we can come up with some interesting prompts. One of the discussions right now is masks. So what masks do we find? What masks something else? What masks this? What masks our personalities? What masks our insights? We can come up with other things that are going on. Let's say things that spread. So what else spreads? Making these associations, these connections, and maybe how do we draw positivity spreading, or how do we write a poem of positivity spreading? Each of these techniques can give us some inspiration to develop something creative.
Thank you. We had a question asking about the site. Actually, go to the page, and that way also I can show you this good, nice feature on StreamYard. And by the way, those of you asking for the spelling, StreamYard. And so I'm just going to share your website, and there it is. And you can see it, Quality of Life Lab. At the Quality of Life Lab, we engineer self-actualization for people and make workplaces great places to work. That's great. So let's talk about work. This is basically our second Sunday for most of us, second weekend of the lockdown in New York for sure. We're getting ready for work. I think there's a lot of anxiety. People are working from home. What did we do wrong last week that as you surveyed folks? And what can we do better this week, and try to stay positive, upbeat as we go through this?
So a couple things. I think the number one thing that we really need to start doing next week is let's have some faith in our coworkers and trust that they really are doing the best that they can. So let's not be micromanaging coworkers. Let's be encouraging. Let's trust that people are going to be able to get done the things that we ask them to get done, and to be flexible in our timing. People are going to need to step on and off all the time. And one of the best things that we can do when we're dealing with that is not only to trust other people, but also to be as communicative as we can about what we're doing, about our situations, what we're dealing with, and again, have some forgiveness and compassion for ourselves for not quite being the workers that we think we should be. And also the fact that our coworkers can't quite be the always-on people that they typically are. Normally, we have a very, very, very strict demarcations. Here's the work time, here's the lifetime, and near the twain shall meet, so to speak, because now always-on culture and so on, not a good thing. But now we really do have to have that blend, and it really is a little bit of everything, and we need to accept that. Along those lines, we're going to have to accept the fact that technology just isn't where we were hoping it was going to be. We're discovering that video chats are buggy, cell phones are buggy, lots of things are buggy. So let's be patient, and I'll tell you what, let's get some really great laughs. I was video chatting with people earlier today, and sometimes the picture would freeze. Boy, do we make funny faces when the picture freezes. Instead of getting annoyed at the technology, let's just get a laugh at how funny our faces are when the phones and when the video freezes.
Let's also get more people into this chat by telling people where you studied, because they may want to tag alumni of places where you studied. You did your BS in neuroscience psychology at Brandeis. I know a lot of folks who went to Brandeis who are in my network. And then you did your post-bac research at the Martino Center for Biomedical Imaging at Massachusetts General Hospital. And then you got your Ph.D. at Claremont Graduate University, which is part of the Claremont colleges in California. And so you've lived on the East and West Coast. Let me ask you, where are people more positive?
I think it's different. California had one type of positivity, and I found that New York has a different one. In California, I found that there was a lot of niceness. People in California are just nice. And as somebody more local to the New York area, I grew up in New Jersey. So as somebody more local to New York, living in Boston, living in New York, I found it was a little bit weird because New Yorkers are not exactly known for being nice in quite the same way. But one of the things that I do find in New York is that people are authentic in New York. Whatever they say, whatever they do, they mean it. And even when New Yorkers could be a little bit more gruff, you just know that they've got your back. And New Yorkers, they are positive in deed, maybe not always positive in word, not always positive in the smile, and part of that is that it's such a crowded city that we want to just give each other space. So we don't really want to start smiling at each other and looking at each other. And, that could be just kind of weird. But instead, just New Yorkers are genuinely good. And in a certain sense, like that not smiling and so on is actually giving you your space, which, in a crowded city like this, that's an amazing thing. New Yorkers have a genuineness and an authenticity. And when they're being good, and they are good people, you see amazing things. It's funny because nobody will smile at you in New York City. But if you trip on a stairwell, in an instant, there are going to be 3 people looking at you. Are you okay? It's amazing.
And let's see some of these other questions. Kalpana asks, do you have to be in flow to produce your best work? And how do you get in and stay in flow when there's a barrage of bad news?
Okay, 2 completely separate questions. Do you have to be in flow to produce your best work? No. People can produce their best work in a lot of different conditions, but we have seen that a lot of people's best work is produced in flow. It's one of those things that is great and often leads to your best work, but you can do a lot of great work without it. And as far as how do we get into and stay in flow when there's a barrage of bad news, that is a challenge sometimes. But one of the things is that we need to be able to focus. And one of the things that
sorry, we may have had Oren Davis stuck. We were just talking about how things freeze, and he may have frozen. If he can hear me, maybe he will come back in. I'll take him off the stream right now. I'm going to kick him out so that he can come back in. So I hope that works. Let's see if we can come back in. And meanwhile, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have about 20 minutes with him when he comes back. Thank you all for being here with us. This is my daily COVID-19 call, and the idea is to talk to people around the world and just bring them together at this moment. One of the things that I ask everyone is that to think of this time as an opportunity to work on something. And the opportunity comes from the time we have. Most of us are not commuting, or some of us have unfortunately had to do less work. So we have more time. We're not going out to as many restaurants. We're not playing golf, whatever it is that we do for creativity and hobby that's outdoors. So one of the things you could do is work on a project of some kind, a digital project, a podcast maybe, or there's a blog you wanted to start. And there were always people who wanted to have you. Oh, there he is. We have him back. Oren, hello.
Weird shutdown thing. I don't know what happened, but remember I was saying technology doesn't always work?
You just said that the tech gods heard you and they said, we're going to teach that guy a lesson. You're never supposed to say bad things about the Zoom and other gods when you're doing this. But I was just saying, Oren, that I want everyone who has an idea to work on something. And I've never seen opportunity like this where people around the world will not just be tolerant of your fumbling first steps in some project you're doing. They will, in fact, cheer you and encourage you. And so I encourage you to do that. These calls started as just literally a kind of voice phone call so that I could bring people together, and they've morphed into this. I've had sponsorship inquiries. A radio station asked if I could simulcast this on their radio station, and that's just in the first week. So I encourage all of you, and I'm happy to help you. If you have an idea, just message me. My email is sree@sree.net, or my Twitter handle is @Sree. I have an open DM policy. Just write to me, and I'm happy to help several people, since I've been saying this on a few shows, people have come in and they've started different things, and I just love seeing that creativity. And we have lots of questions coming in, so I do want to get to them. My guest is Dr. Oren Davis, who is a positive psychologist. For the newcomers, let's get one more definition of positive psychology in there.
Sure. If it's all right with you, I want to finish answering Kalpana's question, if I might.
Yes, please.
So also, as far as finding opportunities to get into flow, part of what we can do is we can find things that challenge us, and we can find things that we really enjoy doing just for their own sake, whatever hobbies you've got, or maybe it's a time to learn a new hobby, something you've always been interested in. And that's a way to find an opportunity to focus, to really dig deep and just shut out the world for a little while. And there are great opportunities to do that. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you. And somebody said a great chance to learn a new language on Duolingo, for example, or one of those other sites as well. And I should say Rose Horowitz is live tweeting this, which is so exciting. Follow her, Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter. And when Oren is back on his at Dr. Oren Davis, he will see all these tweets from her and lots of other people as well. We're using the hashtag Sree COVID-19 calls, Sree COVID-19 calls, so I can go back and look at these. But please do tag at Sree at Dr. Oren Davis. And I should also mention that you want something positive, you want to see somebody who's made something out of nothing, and that's what Rose has done. She's created hashtag women to follow. And it's just a way to encourage people to see new women to follow on Twitter. So that's an example of something she's been working on for several months, maybe a couple of years now, and has inspired me to follow more women. And so when you go there, you'll see an incredible list on that hashtag of women you can follow. Alicia Marie says, we have a Michigan nice that is very Midwest and is different from New York City, East Coast, West Coast. For those of you who joined late, we were talking about where are people more positive, East Coast or West Coast? And one of the lines I liked from Oren is he said that New Yorkers may not always say nice things, but they might actually be nice, if I paraphrase it correctly.
New Yorkers are genuine and authentic, and they've got your back. And they're good in what they do, not always in their smiles or the nice things that they say, but they're very good people. And anytime something good needs to be done, you can count on New Yorkers to do it.
That's great. Kalpana says Californians are thought to be superficial, sunny like the weather, ha ha. Folks, we're about 15 minutes left or so. So if you have any questions, here's your chance to ask a positive psychologist. Many of us have never met one, or at least someone who says they're a positive psychologist. So he's going to give us that definition one more time.
Sure. Positive psychology generally is summarized as the science of human flourishing. I like to call it the psychology of what does work and how human beings can have a good life, flourish, thrive, be successful, live the lives that they want to live, self-actualize. But the formal definition is that it's the science of human flourishing.
So, but you've used that term a couple of times, that what does work.
Yeah.
So again, to go back to traditional psychology, and also a question came in, at what point do you give up and just transition somebody to a psychiatrist and medicine?
So I would say that psychiatry and medicine are evolving fields, and they are making a lot of strides. Some things, some things cannot simply be solved with therapeutic techniques. I would point out that medicine is something that's supposed to be adjunctive, and that really people should be working together. I don't know that it's so much transitioning from one to the other as much as when is it time to bring a psychiatrist and medication onto the team. And as when people are trying to bring themselves to better and better mental health, for some of them, non-medical approaches are sufficient. Therapeutics approaches, coaching, mentoring approaches are sufficient. For some people, it's not. And one of the things I've said a couple times is that you really need to handpick your therapeutic team. But you build a team, and sometimes you find that you do need medical interventions as well. And so you add a psychiatrist to the team. The psychiatrist will evaluate and decide whether medicine is also an appropriate thing to add to the team. But think of it not as switching from a therapist to a psychiatrist so much as adding a psychiatrist to the team, to the therapeutic team.
And there are still, so I come from a culture where psychology, psychiatry, talking to people, therapy is kind of frowned upon. What do you say to people, especially immigrants who come to a country like America, where on the Upper West Side there seem to be a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists in every block? How do you, first of all, how do you account for that difference in the cultures? What happened in America over all those years that it became so friendly to therapy? And what do you say to people who come from cultures where it is not the case, and how can they make that transition?
I'm not sure America is so friendly to therapy. It should be. I think we're working in that direction, but I think that there's, when you consider how much stigma there is for people with mental illness, and how much stigma there is against finding mental health tools and assistance for using anybody but yourself and anything other than self-help. I would not say that America is so friendly to therapy or psychology. It should be. I hope it will be one day. But I think that a lot of cultures really focus on making sure that the individual can do things on their own. There's this stigma of asking for help in general. Many of these cultures really, really emphasize self-sufficiency, and so going to get help on anything is sometimes frowned upon. Nobody wants to be a burden to others, and I think that that's the difference. And yet, really, what it is in many cases, it's an exchange. We go to people, we ask for help, we give them something in exchange. In some cases, that's money. In other cases, it's not. Also, many cultures are frugal. So, what are you allowed to spend money on? What kind of help are you allowed to spend money on? When does it make sense? When doesn't it make sense? And I think that also when we talk about immigrants, many immigrants need to be a little bit more frugal when they come to this country. I'm only second generation American myself. My grandparents were very frugal people. And so, watching that, observing that, I think that that's also part of the culture. So I'm really hoping that we will be much more open to asking for help, accepting help, and in some cases, paying doctors to help us. We need people to work on our bodies. We need people to work on our minds. And for many of us who believe in having a spirit or a spiritual connection or something along those lines, we do need to pay people to help us with the spirit.
All right. Thank you. Doug Levy, who has written a book about the coronavirus already and published an ebook. How about that? He, first of all, Doug, I hope you will post the links to your ebook, which you're basically giving away at cost, not really charging in a way that you'd make a profit, so that most people can benefit. Please post that in the comments so I can share it here. He says, I wanted to continue and complete flying lessons as a hobby. Can't do that. So he wrote that book. I think he's already working on a second book. Tell us where you're watching from, folks. And by the way, Doug is SF Doug on Twitter, and he's fantastic. Tell us all your Twitter handles. That's Dr. Oren Davis, and I'm at Sree. Mark Lee says we need to be positive these days, which is such an important idea. He's in Durham, North Carolina. Mark says a friend of mine practices positivity, but even he acknowledges sometimes he needs aid. Sometimes he uses medicines and sometimes drugs. So I guess different things. Doug says Americans need therapy. And Mithila says, this is the first time the world is coming together for one reason. This shows how we needed each other to overcome this devastating pandemic situation. Thank you to Sree and Oren for your support and direction given to stay strong and positive good wishes. Thank you. There you go. We've done our mitzvah for today. And Mark says it's also an issue in the African American community where it's often used in prison issue and also sometimes fear of European definition of sanity. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I am less familiar with some of the mental health challenges in other communities, including the African American community. So, but what I would say is that almost everybody in almost every community could benefit from a little bit more therapy. I think that it's something that we could all really get something out of. And for those of us who would have the privilege or the opportunity to get some coaching or to get some therapy, I think it's a great thing. And for those people that I have learned from, I'm certainly very, very grateful to them and for them. So I do think that some of these stigmas are a little bit more challenging in some of the minority communities. The idea of self-sufficiency, frugality. The minority communities, for example, the African American community, I think are really struggling with that because there is a stigma against not having mental health or, struggling with mental health issues. And although I think that the African American community faces a lot of stigmas on a lot of things, and so there is also some chicken egg problem in there as well.
Patricia says, I see New York City as a therapy capital of the universe. And I guess that's what I was saying. And she says it's a good thing. But what Dr. Orin was saying is that, in fact, there's still a long way to go. So I guess we were comparing it to the rest of the world. At least the Upper West Side in New York City seems to be very talc friendly, but he says not so much. And that reminds me that I see this Michael Phelps ads all the time for, I forget what his app is, and there's a lot more like meditation and all this stuff. Do you think these kinds of online tools can be helpful in this space?
Not as much. I think that what I do think is that these online tools are often good gateways. Many of them are better than nothing, but I think that when people are going to engage in any kind of mental health practice, this is sort of like taking vitamins. Like, don't take vitamins without talking to your doctor. Similarly, it's not necessarily a good idea to just start randomly doing things that promote mental health practices without actually talking with some kind of expert. There are risks to mental health practices. Even things as simple as mindfulness meditation, there are risks for some people. You do need to know if you're one of those people. Some examples might be people who have had traumatic experiences or people with mental health challenges of various types. Mindfulness meditation may not be the best thing, or some other forms of meditation may not be the best thing for you, especially off an app, unless you're under the supervision and care of an expert who is actually supervising what you're doing. So very important to be careful about those things. Also to recognize that you can't learn off an app what you can learn from a teacher. So these are nice basic things, but they're not going to be tuned and calibrated to your actual needs. So it's a nice way to try it out. But what I would say is, if you're planning to use an app for meditation or mental health or anything along those lines, think about that as a try before you buy. But after that, you really do need to get something much more customized, something that fits you, and something where you're getting some guidance from a live expert who's getting to know you and your particular situation.
Great, thank you. Steve Taylor's watching from Philly, and he's given us his social media at Steve DeReeve. And Susana is watching from Mexico, Susana Cejas1. Please do follow her. Chitachi says, religion also plays a role in the African American community. Some think that prayer alone is all people need. And we saw that where Dr. Ben Carson, great, very famous brain surgeon, I'm sorry. His book title has about gifted hands, so I sometimes confuse the two. But he called for, National Day of Prayer, and we hear that. One of the things that I'm showing right now on the screen is Doug Levy's book. So everyone, if you'll just pull out your phone and take a picture or do a screenshot of his book URL, you can see on douglevycom/COVID-19 ebook. And I'm just going to show you what the book looks like by just navigating here. And I love that it pops up with sign up for updates from Doug Levy. He is a terrific expert on how communications work during crises and before crises and after crises. He and I worked together at Columbia University. It's so impressive, the work he's done. And so this is the book he's pulled out so fast. It's called The Communications Handbook for Coronavirus. And it's a $30 book. It's on sale at $19.99. And he's not making a profit. He wants to make it a book that can help as many people as possible. His other book, a very successful book called The Communications Golden Hour, Essential Guide to Public Information When Every Minute Counts. And this is from all his work he's done with police departments and others. So if everybody watching would just go look for this book right now, we have on the screen the URL for that book. Otherwise, message him, SFDoug, at SFDoug. I know you will benefit from this. Lots of people will benefit from this. We're supposed to be united. Instead, I see divisive behavior, especially regarding politics. So we made it to 9:59 without talking about politics. But if you don't mind staying for a few more minutes.
Not at all.
Okay, so let's spend 3 hours talking politics.
I mean, all right, if we're going to go there, we're going to go there. I think that a lot of those divisions are very much unnecessary. And I think a lot of it is people have different views about what is the best thing to do. And some of that does fall along political lines. But part of it is that we're using politics to label people in ways that are very unnecessary. And I think that, when we start using those general labels about people, conservative, a liberal, a Republican, a Democrat, we are starting to dehumanize folks. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do is here, and especially in these times, is that we need to rehumanize. And we need to look beyond the labels, and we need to recognize that in many cases, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, we've all got the same goals. And we've all got the idea of building a unified nation, promoting the best welfare of that nation. But this is an 800 million person nation, something along those lines. That's a lot of people to govern. And we have a very diverse nation, much more diverse than many, many other places. And so we've got to think about the needs and well-being and different ideas of well-being for a lot of different people. And that's going to mean that there may be different priorities that different groups are going to have. And that does lead to divisions. In some cases, people are thinking, what about the short term? Other people are thinking a little bit more about the long term. Some people are trying to balance the two. And we do find that, as we look at these different labels, as we unpack them and we look at the good that they're promoting, and each side is promoting some good, you have to think about the fact that they may be thinking about good in a different way from some of the others. And we need to all recognize that we really are looking to promote the benefit for humanity. Now, the news is very good at tracking the bad actors, perhaps in part because they're news. They are weird. These bad actors are weird people. And I mean, for example, there have been a couple of politicians that have been highlighted for corruption, but just take a moment to count how many politicians there are. And then you begin to realize how few politicians have done corrupt things when you look across the board, or at least egregiously corrupt, to say what you will. But whatever it is, across the board, it's actually not that many. It's a very small percentage. And as we see, bad actors in different places, they're in the tiny minority. Perhaps that's why they're news. That's why they're interesting, because they're weird. They're unusual. Whereas almost everybody else really is looking to do their best, to be their best, and trying to create goodness and good lives and good opportunities for everybody else.
Chef Tom Belleringot is watching in San Francisco, and he says he's working on learning Spanish using Duolingo. And over on LinkedIn, he says, Sree, stop touching your face. I do touch my face too often. And, this is
As
like...
do I.
Sorry?
As do I.
Yeah. It's like being on stage. You don't know what to do with your hands. And so one of the things to do is like this. And he says, stop touching your face. I think that's very good advice. Let's see here. Steve Taylor says, I use the Calm app and YouTube app for mindful meditation sessions at City Coho, a Philly co-working space. I used to work several days a week. I led the sessions with my friend Jen, the community manager, who's also a yoga teacher with lots of training. So he's found some help in using these kinds of apps and things like that. And he says, while mindful meditation has been an amazing daily tool for me, I do use the Calm app. I did have training from the University of Pennsylvania mindfulness program before this. Also have a wonderful therapist who's helped me for over a decade. See, those are the kinds of things that I don't see people in my community announcing that I had a great therapist. Like, people would see it as an issue in some circles. It's seen as that you are taking care of yourself. You have no shame in saying you have a physical trainer, you have a tennis coach. But if you say you have a mental coach, will we ever get beyond that, you think?
I hope so, and I think we're slowly chipping away at that step by step. But I think that it's important to sort of see these folks as teachers. We learn math, we learn social studies, we learn writing. I think it's valuable for us to learn mental health and for us to learn self-care and self-management. And what I think is interesting is that we often stop teaching this as, formal lessons somewhere around the end of middle school. By then we've really stopped with that. And I think that that's something we should be continuing to do. And instead we're having to seek it out ourselves. But I think at bare minimum, as long as we're in the education system all the way through college, and, those of us who go to grad school, I think that there should be courses on self-management, mental health, positive development. For many of us, we do find that in our houses of worship and in our religious communities, for those of us who are religious. Many who are atheist or agnostic or non-religious, they build their own communities of education for this, and that's a very, very good thing. But I think that it would be worthwhile for us to have more formal training on this. And there are people that are out there to teach us. Many of them we have the title therapist or doctor, but they also have clergy titles. And some of them are just everyday heroes who don't have a title but are just amazing in our lives. And some of them even have titles that are called mom or dad.
I love that. By the way, my friend just tweeted me. He said one of my colleagues watched your conference yesterday. I mean, today online, and he meant yesterday. And he said the days are running together. Is that something you've experienced where I have to really think about, is today Monday or Tuesday or Sunday or whatever? Like, because we're not traveling as much maybe to work, and there are fewer things that are markers in our mind. Why is that?
It is Sunday, right?
Yeah, it is Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially weekends. Weekends are a little bit fuzzier because in many cases our weekends were the times when we go out. So I mean, I'm religious, but a lot of the religious institutions are shut down. So now I'm not going out to prayers, and I'm not going out for those things, and so it's a little bit disorienting. We're not going out and socializing on the weekends like we used to, and so it's a little bit weird. It's like, okay, wait, this is a day where I'm waking up, I'm home, I'm not going out today, and I'm not going to work, and I'm not going. What am I doing? What day is it? And that can lead to things all running together, and especially because transition points, like just walking out the door, getting on the train, getting in the car, walking along the street, going someplace. These physical demarcations help us know where we are and when we are. Space time are related, so we need those cues.
Yeah, we have. We'll go till 10:15 if it's okay with Oren, folks.
Sure.
Please post your questions. We'll do quick questions, quick comments, and a lot of people complain. You've chosen Twitter as one of your platforms. Dr. Oren Davis is your Twitter handle. A lot of people think of Twitter as part of the problem, or Facebook as part of the problem. Though at this moment, I think people are seeing the internet can really bring people together, and how nice that is. Alicia Marie, by the way, who's watching in Michigan, she says, so important to have connection with a mentor, coach, therapist. Growth requires a structure of support. Lovely. And while we were watching here, one of my former students says, 10 years ago, when I was an innocent Columbia journalism student, Sree insisted we all join Twitter, and here I am a decade later, addicted and opinionated, but none the wiser. How do you see Twitter?
So, as with so many things, don't blame the tool for how people use it. Twitter's a tool. Facebook is a tool. I'm not saying that they're the best design tools, and I'm not saying that they are the most beneficial tools, but I think that they have many positive uses, and I think that we can use them in very positive ways. But I think that we need to own up to the fact that we don't always use them as well as we could or should. And that's not it's not on Jack Dorsey. That's on us.
Right. I agree. I totally agree on that, and I just wrote that back to her. Let's go see some of the questions or comments. Alicia Marie says, here's a media source dedicated to positive news. Ooh, Good News Network together, and she's got the Michigan tag in there. Kalpana says, great point about Indian Americans and their attitude about self-care and self-management, but they will talk about their cholesterol numbers. That is so funny because I always talk about my cholesterol numbers, and we're obsessed because we have very high cholesterol. Arlene says, I'm leading a tour of my apartment while playing a kazoo. Maybe time to write a book. And Steve says, Arlene laughing about the kazoo. Definitely start writing a book. You have lots of wonderful stories to tell. Mark
I agree. If you can walk around your house playing a kazoo, you've got great stories to tell.
And Mark says, how do you feel mass lack of socialization will impact people? And I've been saying, let's not call it social distancing, but social closening, and physical distancing is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with the physical distancing part. I think that actually this is an opportunity for people to think a little bit more about what they say and the words that they choose. And that's something we've all, and I've noticed this myself, that I'm spending a lot more time developing my speaking and developing how I connect to people through words, through gestures, and in some cases through tone, and also a little bit, as we're doing more video chatting, through body language. But I think that, we all do miss touch. I think that touch is something we all need. And I think that this is also showing us the value of it. And as a society, we've been wrestling with the nature of touch, what it is, what it does, how to do it properly, appropriately, effectively. And we're getting to take a break from that. So I think we're getting an opportunity to use our words and to think about that. And I think that this is going to give us the chance to break down our communication into pieces and analyze them bit by bit. And that, I think, is an incredible opportunity. And then also the fact that many of us are actually socializing more because we're reaching out to people, we're checking in with people. As I've gotten notes from concerned friends, I've sent some of my own. So we really are getting together more now in certain ways. And I think that's a great thing. We're showing much more care about one another than perhaps we did before.
We saw this trending yesterday, Cuomo for president. And for those of us old enough, we remember when many of us wished Mario Cuomo ran for president, and he famously decided not to run. His son, Andrew Cuomo, is now governor of New York. And a lot of us watching him feel very calm and feel like there's somebody in charge. How do you, I don't know if you have political views on any of this, but what is so attractive about Mr. Cuomo at this moment? There wasn't a big clamoring for him to run for president when everybody else was running for president. How do you feel about all that?
So I think that Governor Cuomo, and I live in New York, so he is my governor as well now. I think that Governor Cuomo has been very definitive in his statements. So he's been very clear.
Definitive. You said he's been very definitive, yeah.
And when we need leadership, often when we're looking to our leaders to tell us what to do, for better or for worse, we want something clear and distinct to tell us what to do. And Governor Cuomo has stepped up on that. For whatever else you may or may not think about Governor Cuomo, and I've got a lot of opinions about him that's, positive and negative, like any politician. But I think that here, where other leaders have been somewhat fuzzier in what they've had to say, Governor Cuomo has not been fuzzy at all. I think he's been, at least in what I've seen of his statements, which may not have been all of them, but the ones that I've seen have been very clear. They've been very distinct. He's also been very realistic. People have been talking about, the extent to which somebody can enforce stay-at-home rules, and Governor Cuomo is open and realistic about that. Ain't nobody going to cage up New Yorkers. Yeah. So, in that sense, I think he's been clear.
This going over to my LinkedIn, so many great comments there. Steven says, greetings from Charlottesville, Virginia. And Jim says, can you define flow a little better? We'll come back to that. Bob says, yes, work on something right now. Love your advice. And what do you say to people when you have to lay them off? So that's another good question, especially for work, as people are thinking about work right now and what's happening. So first, let's ask that question again. Define flow, please. Define positivity again. And then we'll come to how do you deliver bad news? And I have a specific example around that.
Okay. So flow is an experience often considered the optimal experience or the most positive experience that we can have. But it is an experience in which we find ourselves pursuing a goal that is challenging and that requires us to bring our A game, that we're motivated to do, that we can get lost in, and where we feel like we've got a sense of control because we know whether we're pursuing the goal correctly. And then positivity is really about flourishing, about how we do our best, be our best, things along those lines.
Okay, so two things. One, if you're a positive psychologist, you have to be a positive person generally, I presume. And,
I try.
And I also always try to be positive and, more importantly, project positivity. There are more than one occasion where somebody has implied that they find it irritating when you're too positive when the world is melting down. And second was a question that was asked on LinkedIn. How can you stay positive when you have to lay someone off or anything else that's really how to give bad news when you're trying to be positive?
So first of all, just respect the fact that this is bad news. Be compassionate, and sort of some of this is how would you feel being take a moment to think about how you would feel being on the other end of this. What would you want someone to say? What would you want someone to do? In a very real sense, some bad news, especially things like people being laid off, there's no real way to soften that blow in a lot of ways. Like you're you're ripping the carpet out from under somebody. I mean, I would raise the question about why companies feel the need to do that. That's a whole nother long discussion about how many companies, especially the ones that theoretically could afford to maintain their employees, they really, really should. Some, however, are facing the stark reality that they can't. And that is, and for those companies, that's a very difficult situation anyway, because they can't maintain those employees. And that's part of what it is that, think about maintaining somebody on. This is, it's not a won't. It's not that we won't keep you on. We actually can't. And this is something like, we're in a bad situation, and, unfortunately this is translating to a whole lot of other people, but this is bad for all of us. And for those companies, at least I would like to hope that companies that are laying people off are the ones where basically ain't nobody getting paid.
Right.
Or where they're in such dire straits that nobody's going to be able to sustain the business, or that barely anybody is getting paid, things along those lines. And in some other businesses, I've been seeing them actually tightening their belts and actually helping out, tightening the belts on the profits or in their own shares, and helping to contribute. And one of the things that I saw, and I saw this back in the crash of 2008, and this was incredible, that in some companies, people voluntarily took small pay cuts, very small ones, to actually help cover the salaries of people who would otherwise have been laid off, and that they would hopefully get the salary raised back later when the economy would come up. But people weren't even asking that; they were just saying, "Here you go. We'll help cover this," and that support is good. One thing to do is to hopefully come in providing some solutions. Where might they be able to be transitioned? Before you deliver the bad news, like, here's the bad news, now here's the good news. The good news is, these companies are looking for people, or I've got a friend that I can recommend you to. If at all possible, see if you can find some good news. See if you can find some ways to help cushion that blow, whether that's severance, whether that is a connection, whether that is other jobs that they might be able to do, something that you're able to do to help, or, some connection you can make. And I think all of us have ways in which we can produce some kind of positivity for this and give some kind of help.
And the answer to being too positive, where people see that as maybe a little, they think it's too much, too artificial. Like, nobody believes that you can be so positive all the time.
I'm not so positive all the time. I mean, I'm just going to start right there. Nobody's that positive all the time. And I have to agree with whoever said that. I'm sorry, I forgot the name. But you know what? I find people who are positive all the time really irritating too. Because you know what? Life is not always so positive. But what I think is necessary, though, is for us to recognize when we're having those negative moments, and when we have those freak out moments, that, okay, we can have our moment of freaking out. Like, what I like to say, if I find myself freaking out about something, it's like, okay, I'm just going to start the clock. I'm going to give myself some time to freak. And, when it's done, I'm done. But just to acknowledge that we really do feel that way, that we have that negativity. And when you're shoving positivity in somebody's face and they don't want it, you're not being positive. You're being annoying.
Alicia Marie says that truth and transparency delivered in a kind, caring, and compassionate way, humanizing the experience of bad news, or coming together as a collective team. These are all great ideas. So I really have to let you go. It's already 10:20 here. Are you in for the duration? You're working from home, obviously, and all of that.
Yes.
So you have nowhere to go. You're in New York this week, and I hope you'll check in with us again, Oren. It was such a pleasure to get to know you. And Oren just wrote to me out of the blue. We were on Twitter, but he wrote to me out of the blue. And I encourage all of you to be in touch. We're going to do this every day during this crisis. So, Oren, if you have any friends who should be my guests, this week we're going to have multiple really important conversations. We're going to talk about economic hardship tomorrow at noon. Please join me Monday at noon if you're watching this live. Otherwise, you can see it in the archives. The archives are on YouTube. Please subscribe to me on YouTube. Sreenet is my YouTube channel, SREENET. I'm about to cross 500 subscribers, and I'm so grateful. I don't count or compare on the different platforms. I'm grateful for even one subscriber, so thank you for that. We'll be having a special edition just on Italy. We'll talk to people in Italy to hear what's happening. Last week we had a call. Oren, they keep talking about flattening that curve.
Yeah.
But the Italian curve just hasn't started to flatten at all.
And it's so upsetting. And you know that now there have been more deaths in Italy than in China, and that population is so out of whack in terms of numbers. How can that even be possible in terms of percentage? So heartbreaking in both countries, but obviously even worse in Italy. So we're also going to have a call, one of these conversations about museums and what's happening in the cultural sector. And that's a question also for Oren, like, what do we do? We're not going to plays. We can watch a lot of Netflix, but museums are important. The opera is important, and all of that people need at this time, or just, music that they can watch on the subway or whatever. None of that's happening.
But there are a lot of great recordings, and there are so many different cultural institutions that are putting stuff out online. I found out that Audible, for example, put out a whole bunch of audiobooks online for free. There are any number of cultural institutions, museums, operas, philharmonics that and many dancers. I happen to be a dancer as a hobby, and many of my dancer friends are doing like 1-minute performances, 2-minute performances. They are all over the internet, and they're posting these videos, and they're a lot of fun. You also see people that are posting their attempts at art, and that should be encouraging all of us to go for our inner artist.
That's terrific. Someone says, thank you, Sree. Catch you tomorrow. We need these mental health sessions. And look at this. You've got an invitation to join Mark in Durham on his podcast tomorrow at 7. And he's also put his phone number in there. So I don't know if you want to take a screenshot now, Oren, or I should message you this. Or if you have your phone nearby, just take a screenshot and call him maybe. And he runs the podcast. Many of my guests have been on his and vice versa. So I leave that to you.
Or you're welcome to put us in touch. But yeah, I'd love to, Mark.
Okay, just tweet at him at Dr. Oren Davis so that you can find him. And Steve has a great idea. He says he's got to run, but he said that this is fantastic. Please bring back Oren. So hopefully you wouldn't mind coming in once in a while. I won't keep you 90 minutes like this.
That's okay. I'd love to.
Maybe this is my therapy. I couldn't afford you for 90 minutes, and we're getting you in here. But in all seriousness, thank you for doing this. Any chance you can lead us out in a moment of calm or meditation, anything before we go?
My pleasure. Sure.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to offer to people is just an opportunity to just come up with one word. And that's where we're going to go. But first, I just ask people to close their eyes if that's comfortable for you, or to keep it open, either way. And just to take 2 breaths, as slow as you can get them, deep as you can get them, and actually take a moment to acknowledge the breath coming in, the breath coming out, and to have that experience. And then let one word come to mind, just to find out where your mind is, and to be aware of that word, to be aware of that one thing. It may be a positive thing, it may be a negative thing, but this is something that you're aware of. And it's okay that you're aware of it, whatever it is, to be aware of it. If it's a good thing, is it something you want to savor? If it's a bad thing, you might find that there's a second word that comes. That second word could be another negative thing that's coming, or it could be a solution that's coming. But for those who are finding that what's coming is a negative chain, this is your opportunity to visualize a break in the chain, to stop that right there, and to imagine something positive that you like, whether it's chocolate, whether it's flowers, whether it's sky, whether it's beach, whether it's whatever it is that you like, to stop there and to enjoy it. But for those who have found that positive word right away, you're able to have that experience of positivity right there. For those who are not, you've had the moment of breaking something, or you've had the experience of a solution. In any case, this is something that you can do repeatedly throughout the day, just to find the thing that's on your mind, and either to enhance the positive, to find a solution, or to put a break in the negative and to replace it with something.
Wow, thank you. That was so great. I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to use that. So the technique is to think of one word and then think of another and see what the connections are, right? And not get into a chain of negativity, right?
Or to hold the positive. If positive is the first thing that comes, to hold the positive.
Right. Well, I'm going to definitely hold the positive. That's at Dr. Oren Davis, and his website is at qllab.org. Please follow him, check him out, check out his work. If you work in HR in a big company, reach out to him. He can really help you, as you saw today,
think bring out the best in your team, and you don't have to wait till everybody comes back. He can do these things online, right? So I hope you will reach out to him. I hope you'll get a chance to work with him. And Oren, I'm just so grateful. And Steve says, have you back. We'd love to have you back in the weeks ahead. Thank you, and wish you the very best as you hunker down, and see you soon.
Thanks for you as well. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to say goodbye and take you off. And that was Dr. Oren Davis, who was with us. He is absolutely terrific, and we're so grateful to him for his time, his energy, and to all of you. Thank you for watching. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at noon talking about economic hardship. I have a fantastic show. Let me just tell you who all are going to be on it, because it's going to be something that you will want to hear. We're going to discuss economic hardship and inequality during the COVID-19 crisis with 3 fabulous guests. Camille Sweeney, who wrote a great Guardian piece about folks who suddenly lost their jobs, and Rebecca Lee Silverman, who is a mixologist who was featured in the story. And we'll also be joined by the executive director of the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, a great organization that I work with. It funds coverage of inequality and poverty in America, and they helped underwrite this story. Immensely important story. Please join us tomorrow. We're going to be talking from noon to 1 on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can find all my archives very easily on YouTube if you go to SreeNet. I'm also live there when I do this, so it's a chance for you to connect with me there as well. I am so grateful to you for your time, and many of you who stuck through the entire 90 minutes. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. And I'll say goodbye. Thanks very much. Please email me if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for guests, anything. Thanks. Bye.